All right, I'm going to go ahead and announce our next two speakers. They are from New York, New York. We have Rajesh Damarapati and then Devika Kornbacher presenting on an AI topic. Rajesh is the founding partner of Digital Alpha Platforms, a leading software engineering firm. He brings over 2 decades of experience in financial services and enterprise technology. Rajesh is a seasoned Wall Street professional and has deep domain expertise in investment research, risk management, liquidity management, and customer profitability. He has a strong technology background in automation, artificial intelligence, analytics platforms, enterprise shared services, enterprise data management, and systems integration. This background allows him to identify opportunities for digital transformation and innovation, driving value and growth for his clients' businesses. Devika is a technology and IP lawyer. Devika leverages her extensive technological knowledge and experience to assist clients in fields such as software, hardware, sports, aviation, and retail. She is a co-head of the Clifford Chance Tech Group. She provides comprehensive advice on technology-related legal matters, including data privacy compliance, cybersecurity preparedness, commercialization agreements, and obtaining, protecting, and licensing IP rights. Please welcome Rajesh and Devika for our next topic titled Generative AI and Ethics Involved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, you've heard so much about AI. I was talking to Rajesh. I was like, we'll just be done. We're just going to give you your hour back. No, I'm joking. But what we thought is, we have been listening to the other presentations, is this one will be much more focused on kind of getting in the weeds of how it works. So Rajesh here is a technologist. We'll be kind of taking that role. I'll sit in lawyer land, who does technology law, to talk about, yes, we'll talk about the ethics, but also like what we have to live with and how do we work in this space and advise in this space. So, Rajesh, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to your illustrious bio.
No, I think we're
You good? You think we're good? All right. So we'll just launch right in. What we want to do today is kind of talk through the overview of Gen AI. We'll kind of go, what is a model? Because you've heard the word model like out of probably 50 times at this point, that there's a lot of data. We'll break it down a little bit more into the weeds. If we get way too deep in the weeds, just tell us to come on out. Jessica, I'm sure you'll call us on that, so let us know. And
if you are walking out, we'll take that as a sign.
Yeah, right. It's like, that's way too deep. And then we want to start with some of the positives, because this really is a cool thing. Like, as a huge geek, and I'm fine to say it, I'm excited about what this area can bring us. So we'll spend some time talking about the transformative potential of AI, so the good stuff, what we can do with it. And then we'll talk about some of the ethical pitfalls, though, that do exist out there. Not only is it the title of our presentation, but it's a real thing that we're going to have to deal with as this technology continues to develop. So what should you be looking out for? And then, again, we want to talk about why you should care as a lawyer, for those of you who are lawyers. And it's been fun to talk to her. She's like, wait, so you have to do the CLE thing? And like, you have to, how many credits? Like, so we have ethical obligations as lawyers that someone else may not, and that includes with respect to AI. So we'll go over that a bit. And we'll talk about some other regulatory considerations. We don't have the time to go through all the different ones, but I'm going to highlight a few for you to just put on your radar as you're advising clients. And then we'll actually talk about addressing them and come up with some practicals. And we're saving some time at the end to do a demo of how Gen AI works, in particular ChatGPT. But I call it, Rajesh, I call it on steroids a bit, like actually using the API, not just the public-facing one that you've seen. So we'll save some time at the end for that. If we have time, I doubt it, we'll go to Stable Diffusion as well, because we'll have to kind of go out of this presentation and go play with the images. But if not, happy to talk afterwards if I had to do that. One thing I will say, though, about Stable Diffusion, if I go back, so this background image was actually created with Stability AI's Dream Studio. Now, just the background image, the prompt that I put in there was scales of justice with word AI on one and word ethics on another. And I put in, I wanted binary code falling in green in the background. This is what I got. I'm not super impressed. But playing with Stable Diffusion, and I did notice it does much better with some things than others, and we'll talk about that, right? It was really good. And the whole time Rajesh and I were back there, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I should have said falling digits instead of binary code. And it's like that with prompts. We'll talk about it. It really is that nuance to get your product. So even we may not have time, I wanted to show you that this background image is done by prompt writing in Stability AI. So getting to the brass tacks, we wanted to first take a really quick poll. How many of you, and this is just by raise of hands in the room, sorry about those online, feel free to chat, if you want to put it in the chat, just so others know. How many of you have used Gen AI, ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney? How many? Cool. Yeah, that's what we thought. Like most people have actually.
How many are building anything with generative AI?
Look at that.
Cool.
Okay. So for those online, we had 2 that are actually building something in AI. And how many of you has your organization actually issued some guidelines on the use of AI? All right, I see y'all. Okay, so there's something, right? Like things are happening and people are using it. Some guidelines are there. About half the room raised their hand. How many of you think that we will have U.S. federal? I'm laughing. I should just go ahead. But anyway, do you think that we'll have U.S. federal AI regulations before 2024? Okay, not only did I not get a hand raise in the room, but I got a thumbs down. So yeah, we're on the same page on that one. And the reason why we ask these is because that's why it's important that we talk about this. Because we got to do something in the interim while we quote unquote wait for regulation from the U.S. government. So now kind of getting into the basic components, I'm going to cover the left-hand side from a Devika, again, lawyer who plays a little bit of the space, and then Rajesh is going to handle that right side image and kind of getting really into the weeds of this example from ChatGPT. So the basis of the model, what we keep talking about, well, there's a model. And I think Heather had said it's not software, meaning it's not what you think it is. It's not like something written in Python necessarily as a software program that executes, but it is a matrix of here are the parameters. Your model are your parameters and your algorithm all put together. So think about that. That's your model. But that model is dumb when it starts, right? It's just what you already knew, which I'm not saying you are dumb, but it's what we already knew, what the program already knew when they put it in there. And then to make that model smarter, it has to go over to the training data. The training data are these giant data sets. That's where a lot of the privacy implications we'll talk about come into. But what are you training on? But you have this large training data set. Now, to effectively train, you can't just train and go, right, as it's going. That will be very inefficient in training. So what you do is you go into this latent space. It's a lower dimension of space, data processing, where it's living in the latent space, thinking through, is this right, is this not? But it hasn't gone through the whole loop of evaluation, metrics, and sampling. But it's doing the training in that latent space, even figuring out how it's going to say, I want to guess this, or I want to guess that. And then there's the lost space, right? So you have your latent space, which is that lower level, and the lost space is the space where there's a figuring out what to winnow out, right? Because through that process, your model being trained, playing in the latent space, will get to a lost space where it drops certain things and decides that shouldn't even be part of it. Like I'm not even going to pay attention to that part of the training data. So it starts winning down to what it actually is going to pay attention to. Then it starts sampling. Okay, I think I know enough, right? Your model's like, I think I know enough to start seeing if I got it right. And then it starts guessing. So the sampling, I would think of that as kind of the guessing side of your model, your model creation. And then there's evaluation metrics. Did I get it right? So I really do think of AI models as like little kids, right? That you're training and you're educating. And at this point, the kid's ready to go try. It's been practicing and it's ready to go do the thing. And then the evaluation metrics is when it gets the feedback that was wrong, or that was right but not actually right, or like the feedback I gave on that image. I mean, it's kind of right, but it's not really right. And then it gets adjusted, and then the model goes again. So now this trained model, that part not part purple, but in orange, that top part is now a trained model, but it goes through the same thing again. But it's again, smarter than just what the original developers of the AI put in there. So that's the basics of how the model works. But can you talk through an instance of putting this in practice, like in ChatGPT?
Sure, yeah. So if you can see the diagram next to that, which is, it's one of the open domain question answer architecture. There are multiple ways to put this together, but this is a architecture where it's backed by GPT technology, but it also has a custom document store, right? So like it has a component called retriever, it has a component called generator. So basically, as a user, like you're typing in natural language, and there is a natural language understanding layer that's kind of understanding your question, converting that into a query that's going that's going to the retriever, which is responsible for actually getting the context based on your query. And then that context is basically provided to the generator. Generator is the one that is generating the answer or response for that question that you initially typed in its own words. Basically, the generative technology understands the language, it understands the grammar, and it has enough context to come up with answer in its own words, right? So we will look more into how this works functionally when we look at the demo towards the end of this presentation, where we will see, where we'll go a little bit more deeper into how this is actually working under the hood, where like the model is basically breaking it down into multiple questions. You ask one question, but there are multiple things that are happening behind the scenes for it to progressively come up with the answer, right? You can think of it in simple terms, you can think of it as you're interacting in a chain of thoughts prompts approach. The AI model is basically working with you to give you, like progress your ideas in a coherent way, right? Like I was actually joking with Devika, like we should look at ChatGPT or the other technology as an intern that is available to us. So depending on what your question is, what your subject is, how well that model is trained, it can act as a untrained intern versus a skilled assistant, right? Depending on what the domain, what the question is.
Right. And then when you talk about the grammar and understanding that, that's part of what happens in that latent space, that taking the data, that lower dimension of the data where it's not as the complex thing we read, it breaks it down into things it can understand. All right. So then, Rajesh, can you go through kind of the roles? I know that this is from NIST, this image. NIST has issued a framework, which we'll talk about later. We won't go through all this, but we included, I'll just say now, we included a lot in the materials. We're not going to cover everything, but we wanted to give you something to start if you haven't really delved too deep into the legal and ethical pieces of this space.
Sure. So let me give some use cases, right? So that you can basically relate to, let's say if these are the steps or life cycle stages and there are actors involved in building an application like this, so that you can imagine for the use cases how all this might be coming together. Let's think of a travel chatbot, right? We all kind of booked our flights, vacations, business trips, right? I think recently Kayak brought in the integrated ChatGPT into their platform, right? But what can it do for us? Let's say, for example, in the future, let's say if you want to book a business trip, you're going to New York, you're going to be there like 2 days, your conference or whatever you're attending, it's in a particular location. And you have specific requirements, right? So I want to basically stay close to a park so that I can go for a jog. It's a nice summer, spring time. You want to go to Central Park, so you want your hotel to be close to Central Park. And for whatever reason, you want to go for the walk in the park as well as want to have a swimming pool in your hotel. And then you want to be close to, the restaurants that are more Italian, so more Italian food. And there are other priorities in terms of I want to go pubbing or whatever. You want to give those criterias to the chatbot, and you want to say it should be under $500, the hotel room, right? So it basically needs to come back with the options for you, right? So that's what is like the travel applications are building to incorporate the generative AI. Also, another use case, let's say, for example, you are a sales and marketing team in a big enterprise, and you are a B2B firm, and your clients are big enterprise clients. You are a like mid-sized company, large company, your clients are enterprise clients. Now, how can you use AI and generative AI in general to basically bring in more intelligence for you so that you can be more targeted in selling to your clients, right? So things that you can incorporate and put generative AI on top of that could be the Twitter feed of the executives of your client firms. It could be the thought leaders of the product space. Let's say your company is in optical fiber, people who are like thought leaders in the optical fiber space, you could be following them. And you could also be, you're also looking at the LinkedIn activity to see like the leadership changes, executive changes, that is also available for you. And you're also looking at the SEC filings that are done by your clients, because in 10Ks and 10Qs, there's a lot of commentary in terms of where they're going to grow, where they're going to invest, what geographies, what product lines, what kind of strategies that they're going to do. So that could also be an intelligence for your sales and marketing team to really do some targeted selling. And then, of course, the public internet earnings transcription calls, all that can be inputs. And you can have a sales and marketing team actually interact with that application to give you intelligence on, hey, who should I be targeting or prioritizing, like my energies and resources for the sell, because the probability of sale is much higher, right? So if you want to build something like that, you want to first think about the application context. What application am I building? Your travel application is totally different from your sales and marketing application. So you want to basically involve the domain expert, people who are salespeople, who are like trained to sell a product. You want to include them while coming up with the application context. So that's the first part that is out there. And then you want to collect the data and input that you want to provide to this application that you want to build or a system that you want to build, so that it can actually give good results, good output that can actually be used when you apply a model on it, right? And then you want to create your own custom model, or you basically use an existing model, or you refine a existing foundational model to suit your purposes, right? So that's where the building of the model comes into play. And then once you build the model, you want to make sure it's good, right? So you want to basically, again, give it in the hands of your domain experts, actual operators, to kind of give the feedback to you that this is good, I'm getting the data, or actually provide the feedback to the model so that they can fine tune and make sure it gives you the right results, right? And then you integrate this into the last mile, like the actual users, they're not going and interacting with the models. They're typically using their own platforms. It could be Salesforce, it could be Tableau, Power BI, whatever applications that they use. You want to actually take this intelligence, right, or even Excel. You want to take this to where they actually, systems and things that they actually use. And then you want to, again, monitor. Once you deployed it, people are using it, you want to continuously monitor. You want to have that feedback loop going so that you can refine your model. So like here, if you look at, there are activities that needs to be done in each of the stages, and there are actors that are involved. So that's basically the life cycle of building an AI system backed by models such as generative AI.
And then the last piece there, Rajesh, right, like the use or impacted by is the part we're talking about today that we'll go into is like, you've done all that, great, but then you need to think about the use and the impact of that particular model that you've created and trained. So maybe now we can talk about, you mentioned some of those uses, Rajesh, already, but
right.
maybe talk about a few more of the uses that you've seen, avenues of opportunity for the use of AI in general. I know we're talking about generative AI specifically because it creates the largest ethical challenges, but even large language models, arguably, there's an argument that not all of it is generative AI, right? It may just be a large language model. They've been around forever, and deep learning has been around forever. So we want to be careful here as we say AI, Gen AI, not to forget, we're just talking about AI when we're talking about the ethical principles. So if you can go through some of the uses.
Sure. So these are like broad benefits that like organizations or as individuals we can get out of AI applications, generative AI included, right? Efficiencies, like Heather mentioned, like 50 to 90% or 70% of the efficiencies by using Copilot. Hopefully they don't kill it, right? So so that's an efficiency part, so that, you know, like like people could be doing much more important and critical tasks than, you know, like something that is routine and mundane, right? Like, for example, I keep, this is an example someone told me, like when calculators came, everybody thought accountants, we don't need accountants anymore. And then Excel spreadsheets came, and then finally we don't need accountants. Then computers like became a little bit more powerful, and we got the software. Then people thought again, oh, we don't need accountants. We do need accountants, right? So again, same thing with the coders and engineers, like which is, you know, like they won't be doing what they're doing right now with the Copilot and things like that. They'll be doing much higher, like more important tasks, right? So the value chain kind of moves up. And the same thing with the accuracy, like unfortunately the bots, there are a whole lot of issues with the AI and the solutions that are built with it. We'll dwell into that in the next slide. But from accuracy point of view, these are things that they don't get tired, right? They don't need a coffee break, they don't need vacation, they just can keep working, right? So, and also they don't have the behavioral aspect. There are other things that we need to worry about, other biases that goes into the AI models, but the human behavioral aspects are not there, so we can expect certain amount of accuracy because those things don't exist, right? And the cost savings. So like certain mundane tasks, like especially when the talent market is kind of tight, you can automate those things, you can achieve enormous amount of cost savings. Customer experience, right? So again, we all kind of click that help button on the websites. The experience that we got, again, I'm sure all of us have different stories on that help button, but it's kind of evolving. It will get more and more sophisticated. It will be at a much better place in the future. Again, backed by some of these technologies, right? Personalization. We're all seen personalization to some extent. Amazon, Netflix. But that's just, I would say it's tip of the iceberg. There is more that will, more of it will intrude our lives more and more in the future. Improved healthcare, right? So this is a space a lot of people are very excited about because of some of the capabilities that are in the technology. Hopefully there are good outcomes that come out, and like the $3 trillion that is spent every year on healthcare in the country, and where the healthcare system is also kind of strained. AI can play a role kind of bringing down both in terms of the cost as well as bringing the efficiencies and innovation in that space. Better decision making overall for the businesses. It can help executives and businesses become more data driven so that they can take better decisions, which can result better business outcomes for their companies.
And I'll say, I mean, this is a rosy, right? This is a rosy slide. We know that. I know that there's naysayers out there in the audience or out here like, yeah, but what about this? I know. This is the good slide. This is the opportunities. This is what we can do with it slide. We'll get to the oh my gosh slide in a second. But yeah, really quickly with that, I know that so we can get to some of the demo piece here. Rajesh, we talked about like all these different skills, right? These new jobs. Can you talk about some of the new, because you like accountants still have a job, they just do different things. Right. What other kind of new jobs are you seeing in this space?
I'm sure some of us might have heard about prompt engineers, right? Yeah. So I was like when I first saw that as a job role, I wasn't sure what they will actually be doing, right? So because all of us have to some extent become, we have, in order to interact with this technology, we have to become prompt engineers, right? So we need to know how to interact, what to ask, how to get the answer that we want, right? From especially people who tried with ChatGPT, you had to tweak it multiple ways to get exactly what you need. So prompt engineers is one. But the overall data foundation, again, for this to be successful, you need a solid data foundation in a firm, because otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So and then you need machine learning engineers, of course, and then the platform engineers. Yeah. Those roles, they already exist, but there's going to be more demand, right? So some the things that you see here, they're just tools that are built on these on this technology, which essentially is going to change some of the job profiles, right? People who are content creators, marketers, creative people who've built our graphics for our corporates. They don't have to again spend as much time as they used to. If you see the categories under which right now there are applications and the usage is kind of picking up, it's kind of creating the videos, like text, ChatGPT stuff, images. You can create images. Like for example, you can give a painting or a drawing that's done by your children, and then it can actually come back with real quality stuff that you can actually frame.
I mean, if you want to brag as a parent, there's an option.
You can basically, you can frame both things, of course, right? So you can basically you can do certain things. At least your kit can basically put it through, play around with it, and come back with a version, right? Yeah. So same thing with the design, coding. I think Heather and Sumit touched upon it in detail. Audio, like Devika will be doing a demo shortly. Productivity overall, right? So that's what people are kind of very positive about. It's going to give us productivity gains in different areas, right? So that's the...
Yeah. No, good. And then we won't have time to go through all of this, but it's in the materials. Rajesh, I know this is kind of, so people can kind of see what the data set, like, again, we want to just familiarize you with some of the stuff that's a little more in the weeds on AI. Can you talk about what's on this chart and what this was?
Sure, yeah. So this is on the left-hand side, the one with the colors is basically benchmarking, right? So where is human intelligence versus how these models are performing? So these are basically benchmarked on general knowledge questions because these models basically kind of consumed a lot of content that is out there. They kind of know quite a bit of information detail. So on the general knowledge, how did humans fare versus this model? Again, I might sound a little, anti-human, but that's what the data is showing. Unfortunately, it's the data that is speaking. But again, like I said, the accountant example, we will be doing better things, right? So, USAT exam, the benchmark kind of shows that the model, in some cases, kind of performed better. But so far, people see it performing most in common sense reasoning kind of like questions, right? On the right-hand side, I'm not sure if you're able to see that data. So that's basically different models, and then when it is tested on different data sets, like Boole Q that you see is like yes or no type of questions on a bunch of things. It's a data set that is prepared by the researchers in the AI space. And when those questions are given, how well is each of the model performing? The PIQA that you see, the next one is, it's a physical IQ kind of a thing. Like, for example, if I tell this model that, hey, I have 4 pieces of wood and I have some glue, what can I do with it, right? So it will basically come back with some options in terms of what you can do. There are other data sets I won't be going in detail, but it's well-published research that is available. You guys can access.
Excellent. Thanks, Ruth. And then for time, the only thing that I'll highlight here is just, these are just some stats. And of course, it's like where people predict. I remember when we first started the big data movement and everybody's like, oh my gosh, there's going to be 1.2 quintillion, and now we're well beyond that, right? The predictions are always low in this kind of space, but just to say even with probably lower predictions, a 14% higher GDP in 2033 as a result of AI adoption. So it's not going anywhere. I think Heather said that, but and Ed in the first session. This is here. So this is not something we see as being a fad. Now maybe the ChatGPT, right? We talked about this too, right? Like, remember when AOL was a thing and everybody had an AOL account? Well, those things didn't go away. It's just not AOL anymore. Right now, it's the Gmails and everything else. We feel like it's going to be the same thing with the ChatGPT. AI will be here. It just may not be ChatGPT is the biggest and greatest. There'll be something else, but the actual Gen AI is here to stay. So then, we're talking about ethics, right? And there's a half accredited ethics for us lawyers. So now, kind of getting into some of the ethical pitfalls of this great Gen AI. Some of these have been covered in other presentations, right? The dangers. So I'll touch on them quickly. Bias and discrimination, we've talked about that a lot already, but just want to highlight we put this one first because it is one of the largest ones. When we talked about that model development, and you talked like in this great world where you had the marketing people and you had like everybody's working on the model, but we know that's not really what's happening. A lot of times it's the IT or the platform person who used to do it is now doing the AI, but it doesn't necessarily have a diverse set of people making it. Therefore, its outcome, remember that whole, is also biased and maybe discriminating. And then and that comes from the non-transparent, unexplainable, or unjustifiable outcomes. And there are times when I have talked to Rajesh, you're great, but there's even times when we talk this like, yeah, we don't know. Like that's just what happened. That's what came out, and it's working. So we're not going to mess with it. And we get that. But that is an ethical pitfall. It's like, at what point do you say, if you can't explain it, we shouldn't even use it, even if what it did was reliably predict what cancer everybody has, right, between the ages of 18 and 35, as long as they're a Latinx male. So what if it only works for that? It works for them. Let's just use it, right? The idea of if you can't explain the outcome or necessarily reproduce it, should you be doing it? That's an ethical pitfall. And then isolation and disintegration of social connection. We have that already, right? With some of, like, it's been so horrible to get online, but I will tell you, telling a little too much, but one of my children she's just not as gregarious as I would love her to be, okay? But Snapchat, love it or hate it, all of a sudden her and her sister are like even in the house talking on Snapchat. So social media has done that too, right? It's not necessarily disintegrated, it's actually integrated some. There's some that fear though that AI will disintegrate. That it will, well, I'm gonna rely on what the model says. I don't need to talk, no, I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to talk to Rajesh anymore. I got this machine that does better than you, and it actually has better conversation than you, which ChatGPT is pretty good. I mean, it doesn't insult me nearly as much as some other people in my life. But it is one of those an ethical pitfall though, right? Should we be making things that replace that human connection for the EQ, the emotional quotient that we hope everyone will develop as they grow and learn? And then denial of individual autonomy, recourse, and rights. We'll talk about it a little bit more, so I won't go too deep now, but this idea of do you want a human? And we'll get this in the AI Bill of Rights. Like, should a human be involved in everything? But if not, have you taken away my rights without appropriate intervention? Almost like the due process clause coming to life. Should there be more due process when it comes to use of AI? Invasion of privacy and violation of IP rights. I won't cover that only because I feel like it was well covered, right, in the previous presentations about IP rights, so I won't, but it is an ethical pitfall. And lastly is the unreliable, unsafe, or poor quality outcomes, which I think we'll just use an example to kind of go through that. I'm gonna click through, we're gonna talk about deep fakes next, and then we're going to talk about an example of this unsafe, or I should say poor quality outcomes and that ethical pitfall. So going now, so this, you see this? Yeah, this is Morgan Freeman. And if you look hard enough, eventually, keep looking, adjust this image. It's Morgan Freeman, right? Can you press play on the video for me?
I am not Morgan Freeman. And what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability?
There you go. So I'll stop that there for time. But when you had just the image for a second, I know when I first saw it, is that Morgan? That's Morgan Freeman. And then you press play, and all of a sudden your brain goes, okay, that's not Morgan Freeman. But because the static images are getting really, really good, and even the first few seconds of video, it takes your brain a second to do what's called, it drops into the uncanny valley. It's that emotional reaction. The uncanny valley is that emotional reaction we have, sometimes kind of like an aversion or just like an uncomfortability with hyper-realistic human reproduction. That's still a thing. Like the technology, this is about a year old, but even the newer technologies hadn't gotten perfect. We still hit that uncanny valley sometimes. But deepfakes that are a lot shorter or that are static are actually really good. And the audio one, we've talked about this, Rajesh, has gotten so good that there's a lot of scams just so that are going on right now where they can, an actor or anyone who can get enough sampling of a voice on public systems can then be that person to others. So a daughter to a mom.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk about that. I would say I'm the person that still watches 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mom and brother, sister. Immediately I thought, what should we be thinking about where there's a chance that someone could call and pose as, your GC or someone on the
Yep.
business team, and now you're giving out confidential information with not knowing.
Yeah. And so the question was basically, the audio, 60 Minutes had a special on these audio deep fakes, and what should we be looking out for? I'm just going to boil it down but what should we be looking out for? With the knowledge that it could be our CEO, it could be our, general counsel or others that are calling us, and then we're giving out all kind of information. Oh yeah, this is what's going on with that project, And the thing to look out for, Rajesh and I were talking about, like Adobe does have some software that can be used to detect it. Right now, Adobe has been able to keep up with some of the deep fakes and to use signatures, but most people are not good. It's going to be expensive to deploy that on everybody's phone line. So in the meantime, we're saying do the same thing you do with cybersecurity. If someone calls you that you don't expect and asks for something you didn't expect them to ask you for, then question it. It's a horrible way to live, but I've gotten that way, right? Like, I'm like, why do we, how about I come down to your office? Hey, let's get on Teams. And I've done that, I'll chat. And that's just the only, right now we don't have a great system because though the software exists, deploying it is expensive. That would check that every time to make sure that was your mom or that was your GC calling you. Can you talk about the poor quality outcomes a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not Morgan Freeman. No.
Again, this is tied to the deep fake that we saw, right? So sometimes AI, not sometimes, a lot of times it can also give us, the poor outcomes. This is an example where the picture on the left is actually a husky, but the model came back and said it's a wolf because it looked at the background information, snow and things like that. And, the data that the model is trained on is made to believe that if there is snow, it's most likely wolf, not husky, right? So that's an example.
Yeah, and that's where your data set can't just be trusted by what it is, right? You have to get deeper into what the actual data set is and why it's doing what it is doing. So talking about regulatory, some legal ethics and regulatory considerations. So you've heard this rule over and over again, but I'm going to say it again for this particular instance, is let's not forget that we do have a duty of technological competence, which is why this is important. I put, Rajesh, I put, why do you care? This is why you care about this particular part, and in this conference talking about Gen AI, is we do have a duty to understand what we're doing. It says we should keep abreast of changes, including the benefits and risk associated with the relevant technology. In here, pretty much, 90% of the room said they're using Gen AI, but do you understand it? Because according to this, as a lawyer, if I'm going to use AI, especially in my legal work, then I also need to be keeping abreast of changes and be fully, I don't want to say fully, we're not perfectly aware, but of the benefits and risks that are associated with the use of that technology. There's a similar rule under Texas and New York. I know that we have credit for some other states, but the main one's Texas and New York. The same rule exists. It's very similar, as you see there. And then there's also the duty of confidentiality and non-disclosure. You talked about that. The gentleman who asked the question here is, right, we have this duty to keep things secret. We're supposed to make reasonable efforts, according to the ABA rule, to prevent inadvertent or unauthorized disclosure of or unauthorized access to information related to the representation of a client. Well, if we are using ChatGPT, right, we're using these other things. And you said, half of you said you have guidelines, right? I've been working on guidelines for a lot of people on the guidelines for use of ChatGPT because they recognize it's going to be used. And of course, one of the big guidelines is don't put any confidential information in. But one of the things that we've talked about, you have to be a little more detailed than that because, okay, they won't put the client able to put so much around it that it basically is the client of large multinational beverage provider headquartered in Plano, Texas. Well, I didn't say the client. Yeah, you did, right? Like it's one of those things where thinking about this as a lawyer and this duty to not to disclose, we do have to not just say, well, I didn't say the client name. You have to think through what you're putting in these prompts, what you're putting in these open systems. Are you really protecting client confidential information? I mean, everybody knows the Samsung, or if you haven't heard the Samsung example, right? The guy wanted to work on his code, uploads it, and now trade secret's just gone. It's just eviscerated because of uploading it to a public system. So it's the same thing for our client confidential information. We have to be really careful how we're using these tools. And so then the state of U.S. AI regulation, no one thinks we're going to have a federal one, but I want you to know there's several states. So we put the FTC up here, same thing as privacy, which was well covered in a previous presentation. Prohibition of discrimination, Civil Rights Act absolutely applies. There's already kind of lawsuits around that part of the, some of the action from the NYDFS, the New York Department of Financial Services. They already had a fine against, well, an action against for the Apple Card, Goldman Sachs for the use of the Apple Card, saying it was discriminating based on gender by its model. But it came out that it actually wasn't. But they're like, wait, but you're not keeping it transparent enough, right? So this bias discrimination, even if your model's really good and you know it's not biased, if you haven't explained that well, that's becoming an issue. So be aware that that's being used. And there's state privacy laws, but also state laws about automated decision making, and there's just some examples there. Where I want to spend a little bit of our time, just so we can make sure we get to our demo, Rajesh, is The White House, well, the AI risk framework we already talked about, just know that that does exist. 1.0 was issued in January. We expect iterations, but 1.0 has been issued. And since we don't have federal regulation, I've been counseling a lot of clients to align whatever they're doing to that governance framework as a starting point, because at least you have defensibility of saying, well, we use the NIST governance framework as where we, risk governance frameworks as our AI governance starting point. And then the blueprint for AI Bill of Rights, this is more of the non-binding things. There's several non-binding things the U.S. federal government has issued thus far, which is always fun. But the blueprint here, it's what we covered about. The one thing I do want to highlight is that last one. So on the bottom, that's the blueprint for AI Bill of Rights. The last one, human alternatives, consideration, and fallback. That's one I wanted to highlight because not all of the governance frameworks and everything put this out there as a must. But the Bill of Rights says this should be a must, that anytime AI is used, not only should you be informed, not only should you have control over whether or not your data is included, but you should have a human alternative as an option for that AI. But my issue with this is AI has gotten so embedded in a lot of the processes is that I don't think there will always be a human alternative, but according to the White House, there should be. There should always be a human alternative, and there should always be a fallback if you have to pull the AI out. So then I won't spend much time on this. It's in the materials. The EU AI Act, the reason why this is mentioned here and the things in the UK is because they have extraterritorial applications. So even if you have a client or your organization is here in the US, the EU AI Act regulates a large swath, the people who develop it, those who use it, those who market it, like all of it is part of that act. And it says, if you just, again, similar to GDPR, if you market into there, but even broader, if it's used over there or maybe, like it's very broad. And so even if you're wholly domestic, the AI Act may matter. I included this in the materials just so you know that it is a risk-based framework, meaning depending on your level of risk, your regulation scales up, so it's proportional, right? If you're in the minimal risk category, no specific requirements. If you're that acceptable risk, then you can't do it. Right? That's how the AI worked. We expect that because that's kind of a leading regulation right now. It's not enforced, but it is at least issued. We expect that to be the U.S. to align somewhat to that, and we've seen other jurisdictions already run up to that, and China already has one. So if you've missed that, there's like 3 different China AI regulations that are already in effect. So really quickly before we move to our kind of, what we do and how we address the challenges, can you talk through how the industries are ready for this?
Sure. So this is from a BCG's digital acceleration study, right? So they looked at industries to basically figure out who is ready for AI regulation. Ultimately, right now we are looking at some very generic AI applications, but like more and more industry-specific, domain-specific AI applications are going to be developed. I mean, it's going to be used in different aspects of our life and their business, right? So when they looked at who is ready, like the telecommunications and technology, it's probably because this is just guessing, probably because they deal with a whole lot of data and, they're heavily regulated. I mean, telecommunications for sure, heavily regulated. They already are better prepared to handle AI regulations that are going to come, right? So that's what this slide shows. Where is each sector in terms of their readiness to embrace AI with regulations in play?
So now some solutions, right? We've been talking about a little bit. I'll give us some credit. Like we've thrown out a few things here and there, but wanted to put it all in one spot. Was how do you address the ethical challenges? So it's kind of we put together the 3 ways to the 3 steps of addressing it. The first one is to implement ethical guardrails. Someone mentioned guardrails, I think maybe Heather, in an earlier presentation. But what we're talking about is that initial, we're talking about like your initial boundaries, not getting into the weeds of what your guidelines are going to be, but just your initial boundaries in these 3 categories. Can you talk through like the individual organization and society piece?
Sure, yeah. So I'll touch upon maybe a couple of them in each bucket. Like for example, if you look at physical safety, it's autonomous vehicles, right? So basically you need to basically work through issues there. And then let's say privacy and reputation at an individual level, again, your data, all those things. Organizations, financial performance, legal and compliance. Again, as a company, like if you're building AI systems, if you're using certain data and you're doing certain things in terms of applying AI systems for a certain business function, you may run into legal and compliance issues, right? The financial performance aspect is if you're an like an financial like algo trading firm and you're using AI models, your performance is directly impacted by how good or bad your models are. On the society side, national security, like drones and other infrastructure that is critical for the country, like if there are bad actors out there, or your like algorithm is bad, or you bought a software that is kind of didn't go through all the checks, it can lead into some very bad things. And not, it's just like with software, there are already issues that like governments run into, companies run into. Like AI is going to complicate that stuff even more. Political stability, like external players can kind of manipulate certain narrative in the country using deep fakes or other aspects of it. So all those are like challenges.
And one thing is, even when what we're saying is, you think, okay, for my organization, for each of these, right? What are our no-goes? We're just not going to do that. But it has to do this for each of these. Even national security, like when you have, we're only using AI for chatbots, just to help our customers. But then think through, is there a national security issue that could that be used? What do you make? Could someone use that chatbot to get information about the way your encryption? I mean, really, to really think through for each of them in these guardrails, what are your outside boundaries and how might it be effective? And then the next step is adopt some version of ethical principles. Again, so you're coming about, you got your whole boundaries, but now you're coming down a little closer to home and what game you're playing. What are your principles? What we shared here is actually the intelligence community has come up with ethical principles. I know people are like, the NSA, the misinformation that's going to come from, right? You okay? That's already happening. And just like other countries, I mean, you talked about the national security. The use of AI for misinformation is already proliferated. And the presidential campaign, everybody knows it's coming. And so the question is, well, what do we do about it? And as far as the counter, this is what's come up from the intelligence community of, at least we're going to do this. Here are our principles. We won't go through all these, but human-centered development and use. I know I keep mentioning humans, but to really think through, okay, there are people, when we are doing intelligence gathering, CIA, FBI, people are affected by what we do. So this is our principle. We're going to develop in a way that it's a trusted partnership, right? I won't get into the veracity of it. I'm just going to get into these are the principles they came up with. It'd be the same thing for your organization. What are our principles? Like you may have a principle of your organization that's always trusted and verified or whatever it is. That should be, then you got, these are our ethical principles when it comes to AI. And then you get one more level into the weeds when you actually get into your robust AI governance framework. And this is where NIST is helpful. Just like the other NIST frameworks, it's not you don't get NIST certified in AI, right? Just like you don't get NIST certified in privacy, you just have there's just a framework. It's the same thing here. A basic framework of you got to govern, but you got to map, you got to measure, and then you got to manage. So again, for time, we won't go into all the details here, but I wanted to talk a little bit, if we could, before we get to the demo on this piece, because we could have talked about this earlier. We debated this. This is all the risks that are listed in the AI governance framework, but we thought, let's talk about it in the context of how you actually design your program. Rajesh, can you go through that a bit? Sure.
So like, the first, one of the first slides that we saw, different life stages of basically building an AI, this basically is aligned with those life stages, right? So first is like conceptualization, your application context. What is it that you're going to use this for? So that you want to basically make sure the ethical check kind of is a check box there, right? So the second one is the data. You want to basically use good quality data that you are actually authorized to use. All those elements fall into data management. Model development, you want to make sure your model is trained on relevant data. It's not trained on something that's non-representative for the use case that you're trying to build your system for. And then, of course, like any other system, like there may be implementation errors, technology issues, the stability of it, the performance of it. You want to basically make sure the risks and ethical aspects are addressed in all those areas of your model development and deployment.
So now we have left enough time, I think, for the demo and questions. And So I'm going to turn it over to you, Rajesh, because we have a video of the delving into Tesla's 10Ks using ChatGPT, or I should say GPT, right? To be for not necessarily ChatGPT. So if you can kind of talk through what this is, and then go to the demo.
So this is actually from OpenAI, just showing the different steps that are involved in actually training a foundational model, right? So how you're basically in the first step, you're basically building a supervised model by using a sample prompts and then having the labelers kind of mark it as, okay, this is the desired outcome, sort of a thing, right? So that's the first one. Outcome of that will be a supervised, supervised, fine-tuned training model, right? That's what you have. The second step is that's basically focused on the rewarding aspect of it, right? So here, you're basically giving prompts, and then it's like also the answers, the probable answers that it may come back with, and someone is actually ranking them. Let's say if it comes back with 4 possible answers for a prompt, someone is ranking, oh, D is better than C. It should be D is the most appropriate. Next best is C, and next best is A. Next best is B. Someone is doing that ranking. Kind of training that model by using the reward and punishment kind of approach, which is called as reinforcement learning in the AI space. The third one is this is why ChatGPT actually, or GPT, became very popular, is because of the PPO, which is proximal policy optimization. It kind of made things much simpler to come up with the right answer very quickly, right? So with that, we'll go into the demo.
There you go.
So just before we start the demo, I just want to give you the context. So what this demo is about is what we did is we took 10 years of Tesla's 10Ks, which are annual statements that are published by Tesla every year, and then also the quarterly statements, 10Qs, that are published by them to SEC. And then we use the GPT API. We provided this as an external data store, these filings from by Tesla to SEC, and then used the GPT model and asked a couple of questions to see how it actually performs, right? Some of the questions that we asked, the first question that we asked is, we wanted to know like how Tesla's battery and storage business kind of evolved. So our question is, hey, can you tell me how Tesla's battery and storage business evolved over the years, right? So obviously that information in bits and pieces, it's available in the filings of Tesla, right? We'll see what it came back with. And the second question is more specific, which is that there is a certain type of credit that is given by the government for the auto manufacturers, which is when they follow certain norms, and then when their vehicles are of certain meet certain emission standards, right? So Tesla qualifies for zero emission credit, right? So it's there somewhere in the filing. So our general question is, hey, what credits does Tesla qualify for? So that's the second question. So the difference between the first question and second question is, first question, it has to go through a number of filings, understand what exactly happened with the storage and battery business. The second is more pointed kind of question. The third one is more subjective, like it was like, hey, when Elon Musk made that comment that he wants to take Tesla private in Twitter, what legal repercussions did it create? Right, so that's the third question. So we'll see what it came back with. So the first question is, I'm not sure if it's visible and you can see, but I'll read it out to you. So the first question is major milestones in Tesla's battery and storage business, right? So again, for this we used multi-hop mode of GPT, which is it will do something similar to how we might typically do, which basically break it down into multiple sub questions. First, it wants to know, okay, so does Tesla actually have battery and storage business? When did it start? What does it incrementally kind of give more prompts to get the ultimate answer that we want to get? So the first question it basically asked is, what is the history of Tesla's battery and storage business, right? So I'm just going to let it run. So I'm going to read it just in case. Are you guys able to read it?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Yeah, you can see what it is coming back with.
But I see you wrote this in Python too.
Yeah, that's right. So this is like in Python, but it's backed by whole lot of other, like there is AWS in play, there is GPT API in play. There is also other frameworks that are used. So now finally it has all the answers, right? So it basically says, like it asked a bunch of questions to come back and say that, Tesla started with launching, Power Pack and then Powerwall, there is Solar Roof, and then the Tesla Semi, and then deploying grid scale energy storage projects. So those are like major milestones in battery and storage business of Tesla. But in order to come to that question, it basically asked a bunch of other questions as well. And there are years like 2015, 2017 for certain things that it launched, but the final answer didn't include those years. So the next one, sorry, I don't have ability to actually fast forward, so it's kind of, it's a 2 minute.
You might want to let it run just for time.
Yeah. So this is the second question, which is the automotive regulatory credits. What automotive regulatory credits does Tesla get in USA, right? So it basically, the first question it asked is, what regulatory credits are available for automakers in the US? It tried to get the answer for that, and then it asked more specific to Tesla. So,
and then for time, Rajesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is, and we can go through it. We can go through it in more detail. But we want to leave at least a couple minutes for time. We can finish the last demo, but I want to make sure there's no questions. We promised that we would leave a little time for questions. Any other questions before we finish it? Yeah. Go ahead.
This is a really great presentation, by the way. There's just one is a comment, is a question, but this is actually yesterday. There was an OpenAI course that I took.
Yeah.
I just see it as an attorney. If you're able to do this,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like this has sort of changed the game into like how we can evaluate tasks, and you can tell it to write something directly to the business team, use different tones. So that's one thing. The second thing is that going back to the ethics piece and our obligations to provide pro bono services, I see this as a really great opportunity for like legal aid services to help their clients write a letter to their landlord, for example, because they're having particular issues. Do you think that firms should start reevaluating how they provide pro bono services, given that $10 to $20 a month is actually a lot of money for most people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
So the question was about basically using AI to help provide legal services by like giving forms to somebody who needs to write a letter to their landlord. And the answer is, with our technological competence, we should be thinking through how can we leverage these technologies to help society. That's part of the ethical challenge that we can meet. And so I'll tell you, Clifford Chance has a private instance. We pay for a private instance of GPT-4, and we're actually feeding in a private, closed, but we're feeding documents to it to have better template management and to basically have a first-year associate that's GPT run. So I think, I won't say an obligation, but you'll be behind, right, if you're not doing those things. Okay? Thank you so much. We'll be around for questions. Oh, I got to stop from her, but go ahead. Come on. So GPT. Okay, so ChatGPT is the public instance for you to use. OpenAI is licensing. That's what I tell a lot of people. OpenAI has licensed GPT-4, the engine, to several different organizations. A lot of what Rajesh had on those different skills were that. So you can get a private instance that will give you the model, the trained model, for you to then implement in your private cloud or private instance.
Yeah, what we used is 3.5, not 4, but yeah.
Thank you.